A Podcask of Amontillado is a horror podcast, and so we may cover subjects that are not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to another episode of A Podcast of Amontillado, where we delve into the dark, dreadful, and terrifying parts of the world. Buckle up, because it'll be a terrifyingly good time.
Greetings, faithful connoisseurs, and thank you for venturing back down into the catacombs for the conclusion of our conversation with Shaun Rosado about the 1968 classic Night of the Living Dead by George A. Romero. We return to shortly before we left off previous episode, after Shaun's tale of his first viewing of the film. If you haven't listened to part 1, I would recommend that you do so now. Thank you, and as always, Avino Atrocitus.
So, Erin, I apologize that you had to hear the crazy story.
No, that was great.
So this is why Gary had to have me on for this particular podcast, because I'm like, I don't know if anybody's ever had a reaction to Night of the Living Dead, and this is the 68 one. The irony is that the 90 one that came on 89-90 is actually my favorite version of that story. I love that one. We haven't even talked about that.
Yeah, let's touch on it, because I remember when it was coming out, there were a lot of articles talking about it.
Mhm.
There were a lot of things like, oh, they're remaking this movie and it's a classic and they're updating it. I forever had a section of the newspaper I saved with a whole article about it coming out. One of Tom Savini's few directing jobs. And I love the fact that when they asked you, why are you remaking this movie? He's like, I'm making it so at least there's one version that gets George some money.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's very true. That was like a big, and it was funny because it was also his way of, he said it wasn't also just to give Romero money. It was because that was the movie he was always going to go and start his makeup career with. But then he had to go to Vietnam, and he was a Vietnam photographer, and the stuff that he saw overseas, he was like, I have to be able to, if it doesn't convince me like it would have in a real world situation, then we're not doing our job right. So in a way, I'm glad that he didn't do it in 68, because it gave us the 1990 version.
Yeah.
And the zombies in that movie are very lifelike, horrific. I mean, the way they do the eyes, the injuries, the lividity, like the ones that you can tell have been in the morgue, and it's all the lividity down the back. And I also love the fact the way they update the story. They make Barbara more than just a screaming cipher.
Yes.
This is the movie where I fell in love with Patricia Tallman and Tony Todd.
Yes.
Oh my God, Tony Todd is so good in this movie.
He
Like,
is
I loved him,
amazing.
period, because he was Candyman for me.
Mhm.
And then I watched this, and it just solidified like how absolutely amazing he is. And he's another one that, like, outside of the almost cult following he has, who does not get enough credit.
Absolutely not. And what's funny is that when you look at the two versions, I want to talk about Barbara for a second. When you look at Patricia Tallman, and then you look at the original Judith O'Dea doing Barbara, I do not blame the choices that they gave Judith O'Dea. The person who cannot function because the nightmare that you never thought would happen is happening.
Yeah, well, she's a 1968's average woman. So
dude, I was a 9-year-old kid in the 80s where we were literally we're turnkey kids, dude. And it's like I was locked up. I was basically comatose. So I'm sitting here looking at Barbara going like, I totally get it, girl. Like, I mean, I'm right there with her, So, but then to see, Patricia Tallman become the heroine, I mean, and what's great is that she starts out the same way Judith O'Dea does. She basically is like, I can't function. And then here comes Tony Todd, just as hot and just as awesome as Dwayne, right? I mean, just freaking just rolls in and is just amazing as soon as he shows up. I mean, he runs that one zombie over, that bald zombie that's got his face kind of caved in a little bit, right?
Yes.
that guy's makeup never gets enough props because it looks like
Mm-mm.
somebody took a crowbar straight across his nose and like caved
Y
his eye sockets in. And Tony Todd just runs him over with a freaking truck, and then he just pulls up and he's just like, "Hey," just and from go, boom, there's
Yep.
our new Ben, and he owns that movie until Patricia Tallman snaps out of it, and it's that wonderful moment where you get that yellow embalmed bald zombie. The
Mhm.
one that almost looks like a snake dancer as it kind of comes through the window and it starts to kind of like
Mhm.
snakily, gesticulate. And she starts firing into its chest, saying, "Is it alive? Is it really alive? Can you say this
Mhm.
is alive?" And then she finally shoots it in the head and it falls over. And Ben's like, "Girl, you are losing it." And she was like, "If I've lost something, it's already gone." She's like, "You told
Yeah.
me to get it together and I'm here."
Yes.
That was when I knew this movie was going to be something special
The
because remakes very
only
rarely do that.
the only problem I had with that,
Mm,
I I loved the fact that they gave her action
mm,
and
Mhm.
were finally like, "Okay, you aren't just some weak woman in the '60s.
mhm,
Like, actually go do it." It's the same thing they did in Dawn of the Dead,
Mhm.
it's true.
where, like, it's the one guy who's saying, "Here, I'll teach you how to use a gun. Here, I'll teach you how to fly a helicopter."
Mhm.
Right.
Like, it's the same thing they did already, and, like,
That's not an unfair statement.
for me, that took a little bit away from it.
Mhm.
'Cause it was like, I've seen this in Dawn of the Dead already, and it really fucking worked. It was great there. The relationship between the 2 of them in Dawn of the Dead was
Mhm.
amazing. I don't need it again.
Yeah, I think the only reason I push back against that just a little bit, and again, this is like a mild push. This is like a, you know, this is not a full force. No, you are wrong. This is like, it took her months to get there. Barbara basically did a turnaround in about 4 hours. I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
like chronologically, because I mean, when she starts the movie, I mean, she's
Mhm.
basically helpless in Dawn of the Dead. Like, and it
Yeah.
takes her like she tells them, "You will never leave me alone without a gun
Yeah.
again." But like she doesn't really come into her own. Like she doesn't become like the sniper until like halfway through the movie. And by
Yeah.
the end of it, she's like, "I'm the sniper. I can fly the freaking
Mhm.
helicopter. I got I'm a growing up." I mean, literally, like she could like just start slaughtering zombies. And she's like, "You think you can stop me? I can make more people anytime I want to." I mean,
Yep.
that's how awesome she is in Dawn of
Mhm.
the Dead. Barbara just rolls up, freaks out, and then she's back. And I
And
love
that's
that.
what I had the problem with.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
That it's like, you just had an existential fucking
Mhm.
crisis, and within the
Well
span of, like, 3 hours,
Mm,
absolutely fine with going the opposite direction and just
well,
firing a gun into somebody?
she might be running my point on that, she could be just running on pure adrenaline at that point because I love the moment they give her later when she runs from the house to get help, and she
mm.
runs into one of my favorite zombies, the woman holding the doll,
The doll,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
and she's pushing her with the gun, and you can tell that she wants to she knows that she needs to put her down, but she can't because suddenly she's like everything's finally, I think, hitting her. Because I think earlier up to that point, it had hit her, but it hadn't really sunk in.
Right,
And then at that point is when the whole gravity of the situation, I think, finally comes down on her. And she has that little mini breakdown as she's pushing her with the gun and then finally puts her down.
So, w what I'll say, and what I think they tried to do too much with the
Mm,
'90s remake, is all the other ones after the original, we get time spans where
mhm,
the
mhm.
entire thing's not happening in a night.
Right.
right.
They tried way too much character development in a night, where
Ma
she goes from, like,
That's fair.
frozen to adrenaline run shooting to breakdown, and mind you, all of that probably would actually happen if you were put into that situation.
right.
But
And
every
again, it's
other
kind
situation we're given with them, we're
mhm,
given time to watch the development, and in this one, it's just like bam, bam, bam.
right.
So,
And I
like,
mean
the '90s one isn't my favorite. I will take the original any day of the week.
I take 90 over 68 for a couple of reasons. But Trisha Tallman and Tony Todd are big on that list as to why.
Yeah.
But you make a good point, and it's hard for me to argue against it because I want to intrinsically defend Patricia Tallman because I'm very pro Patricia Tallman, and I'm not going to sit here and
Oh,
try to say I don't have any justification to blah blah blah. In my head, because I've watched this movie so many times, because again, exposure, like I just desensitized myself to these movies.
hmm
The 1991 ran all the time on HBO and Showtime.
Oh,
Like
yeah.
you could watch it 6 times a day if you wanted to, if you just went
Mhm.
through like the different
hmm
channels. And in my head, I've always had this little bit of canon, which is she's always been a person who everybody assumes that she's weak, but she's really not. But she's never had a reason to prove to anybody that she's stronger
Now
than
if you
what she
come in with
presents.
that mindset, I can see that,
And
where
that's
I'm
kind of how
looking
I'm
at it
coming into it.
from, like,
Right, right,
the
right. And if
60s
you look,
mindset still, where it's like she went
well,
from being the, like, mild-mannered, I'm not gonna ever call her weak, but the
right.
mild-mannered, not made for that kind of
yeah.
situation
Yeah, she
character.
was a very
Yeah,
classic '60s character in the
yeah.
'60s. I mean, all the I don't even really want to call her a heroine in the '60s.
No,
But
she's
all
there.
female
Yes.
roles in the '60s, especially in horror movies, were the screamers, right? I mean, that
Yep.
was like your job. But I mean, if you go back and literally the only reason I can speak with any authority on the '90s version is that I finished watching it literally an hour and a half ago.
Yeah.
So like I just finished rewatching it right before we started. And part of that is the introduction credits. They're having a conversation. Her and her brother are having a conversation, and he keeps egging at her, and she's pushing back. Now, it's
Yeah.
not like you're an asshole, but she's like, "You're a jerk. Stop doing it. You're gross."
Yeah.
And he's trying to get a rise out of her, and she's like, "Can you just stop?" And he's
hmm
like, "You know what? Mom knew that I was going to have to drive you up here." She's like, "Just shut up, man. We're just going to come in here. We're going to lay down some flowers, then we'll go home." And when I look at that, and I look at the '60s version, when
Yes.
Barbara jumps into the
Mhm.
car
hmm
and Barbara is reacting. In the exchange is pretty similar, but she immediately is freaked out and is basically
Yeah.
by luck gets away from the zombies in '68.
Yeah.
In the 1990 version, she is actively looking, how do I get out of this?
Yes.
Immediately
Yeah.
pull, like as soon as the zombie grabs her, she's like,
hmm
she pulls the parking brake, it slams. She doesn't pass out, she doesn't lose consciousness. She gets up, she runs.
Yep.
Um,
And I want to give a shout out to Bill Moseley as Johnny.
oh,
Yes.
Bill Moseley just showing up for like a day and just
Yep.
giving such a wonderful performance.
Yeah, because that's one of the moments in
Oh,
both this one, but especially in the original.
yes.
That's one of the big moments that shocked people at the time and
Yeah.
still hits me when the final assault is happening and Johnny comes to the door.
Mhm.
And I remember they always the reason he makes such a big deal in the original putting on those driving gloves
Mhm.
is because so that at the end when you see him without his
It's that
glasses, when he
glove.
grabs with the glove, you go, "Oh,
Yep.
Mhm.
that's they made sure to do that."
Yeah,
But
it's
that
great.
moment when he comes through and she just breaks down because suddenly, "Oh my god, it's Johnny, it's someone I know,"
Yeah.
Yeah.
is such a powerful moment.
It really is. And again, for that time, honestly, the person who reminds me most of the Patricia Tallman version of Barbara from the original Night of the Living Dead is not Barbara, it's
Oh,
actually Mrs. Cooper.
yes.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
will wholeheartedly agree with that, yeah.
I mean, she is a rock star, and
Mhm.
Marilyn Eastman, who, by the way, was essentially a producer. If I remember
Yeah.
my lore correctly, her and her husband owned. Now, it's not Eastman Films, or maybe it was. They might have actually been the people who owned Eastman Film,
Mhm.
and they were basically producing it, and they were giving them the film stock. I forget if that's how they got some of their film stock, but I do know for a fact that she was one of the producers, and she was a huge proponent
She
of
was
I
a
don't want to be.
producer for, the Latent Image Incorporated.
Yeah, so Late Image, yeah. And she absolutely rolled in and was like, I'm not just going to be a shrinking violet to my husband. And she
No.
pushes back that movie the
Mhm.
entire way until, of course, she gets killed by the daughter. And it is amazing. I mean, you sit there, and I mean, this is a woman who is, at the time, in the '60s, she is the housewife. She's supposed to be dutiful. She is pushing back. She's all ready to just smack a bitch. I mean,
Mhm.
Cooper like is one off comment away from her just backhanding him. I mean, um, she doesn't have that kind of gravitas in the 1990s remake, but in
No.
'68, man, she's awesome. And again, I'm a dude. Marilyn Eastman, by far, like the most attractive of all the ladies from the '68 one.
Oh,
Oh my, she's
without a
gorgeous.
Mhm.
doubt.
Marilyn Eastman is so. If you've
It
not seen Marilyn Eastman, Google her. She's
Oh my god,
gorgeous.
she's gorgeous. It was
Mhm.
originally Eastman Inc., and
Okay, yeah,
then
yeah, yeah,
they joined up with Lateman after.
there you go.
Okay.
So, but I mean,
Legend.
yeah, but I love Patricia Tallman in this. But I
Mhm.
can acknowledge that if you don't go in with the right mindset of, okay, this is the character is not a shrieking violet, but actually has some,
Yeah.
yeah, I can see it could be
And
too
As
quick.
as a person,
Mm.
I just pulled this up. Not only did she act in it, she
Mhm.
did makeup, props, and editing.
Nice.
nice.
See, I'm
Yeah,
telling you, man.
everybody, it was the 68 one was kind of an all hands on deck.
Yes, it was.
Because Russo was not just a producer and a writer,
Mhm.
but was also on set. The guy who played Johnny, I believe, was also one of the producers. Also,
I think he
I
was.
got
Yeah.
to I got to at Walker Stalker back in I think 2013. I got to meet both Barbara and Johnny and got my picture with them. And it's one of my
Nice.
favorite things I have is my
That
picture
is
with the two of them.
fantastic. Yeah, and I mean, if I remember correctly, I think the guy who plays the sheriff at the end, with the famous line of "Oh yeah, they're all messed up,"
Hmm.
wasn't he like Romero's like real boss, like at the news station or something? Wasn't that like a cameo that he had to give out? And he was like, just make something up, and the guy, and he's like a producer, or he gave Romero something, and Romero promised to keep him in the movie, and so he has like the iconic line of the movie of, "Oh yeah, they're dead. They're all messed
They're all
up,"
messed up.
and it's like
He
it's an
was a
ad lib line.
Yeah.
But
He'd
I
been a
forget.
member of Image 10 Films and where he worked as crew and was one of the original 10 investors in the
There
movie.
you go. So he was one of the original
Yeah.
investors then, yeah. But yeah, I'm telling you, the '68 is amazing. But the '90 is also just, I love that, and I love the fact that it gave Romero a version that he could make money off of. And
Yeah.
I think what's
Mhm.
interesting about that version is it kind of came and went, and people didn't really catch it
Oh,
because
No,
zombies weren't hot at that point.
no.
mm-mm.
It
Yeah.
was slashers, it was Clive Barker, it was Cenobites, it was,
Yep.
vampires were really starting to have a resurgence with Bram Stoker. Was the Bram Stoker Dracula was what, a year or two away. Interview with the
Yeah,
Vampire was,
92. Yeah.
yeah, I
Yep.
mean, you're talking 91, 92 is basically the vampire
Mhm.
resurgence,
Yeah.
and zombies were on the way out.
Yeah, and if you wanna watch this, by the way, there is a company on eBay called Team Blue, BLU.
Mhm,
They have legitimate from the studio's production rights to print various out of print
Mhm.
movies.
mhm,
Their version of Night of the Living Dead 1990 is the one to get because the original and most of the other official DVDs that are out, they for some reason decided to put this blue wash over the film to darken
mm.
it up, and it cuts the films, but it looks muddy. It's not very good. The Team Blue version is restored, and it looks so much better. It's the
Also,
if you want to have a physical copy, that's the one to get.
if you have Shutter, Team
Mm,
Blue gave Joe Bob Briggs a copy of their one of their 4K cuts of it where
yes,
they've upscaled it. So it is like the most crystal clear streaming
yeah,
version is the one that's on Shutter
yeah,
that you can watch.
yeah,
And it looks phenomenal.
yeah. Pardon the expression, but it's a difference of night and day.
It
Yeah.
really, I mean, it really is. And the thing is that black and white film, especially at that time, was not very common. So at that point,
Oh,
movies were
no.
color.
Hmm.
So, and this was the last of the real great black and white movies where people still knew how to make
Hmm.
them. Because a funny story is that people who make black and white films today, they can't get some of the depth of field. I mean, go
Oh,
back and watch
no.
the old Twilight Zones.
Oh
Those
yeah,
those films are crisp. Those movies have depth that you cannot
Yep.
get with modern film, unless you take regular, digital, and then you basically desaturate it.
Yeah.
hmm
And it's because it's a lost art form working in black and white. It really is.
yeah.
And just Romero, just again, just beautiful because that's
I
what he
think
worked with.
one of the favorite panels I ever went to at a convention was how they did makeup
Mhm.
in black and white
Mm,
films,
yeah, it was a whole
and
different
that's
technique.
part of it,
Yeah.
is that, like, you used colored makeup in order
Hmm.
to get the different fields of
Mhm. The
view
different
and
grays.
yeah,
Hmm.
and the different levels on people's skins, and so it was like you would see them, like, in the studio, they'd have green and purple and blue makeup on
Mhm.
so that it would show up on film.
Well, I mean,
Yeah.
Gary and I have talked ad nauseum about Gilman and how the creature from the Black Lagoon
Oh, yeah.
had like bright pink lips because
Yep,
that's the
Yeah.
only way you could get that definition. But you rarely see him in anything with bright pink lips because
yep,
it was like when they made the Munsters. They brought the exact same makeup team back, and they said, let's do a color movie. And they put the exact same makeup on them,
yep,
ex-
and it's
except you can see it in color. And it's
terrible.
Yeah. Well,
like,
I mean, yeah, not to get too far afield, but the upcoming monsters that Rob Zombie is doing, he puts them in
Uh-huh,
that classic.
yeah.
And yeah, it kind of looks goofy, but then you have to remind yourself, well, that's what they used.
yep.
And Rob has been on record as saying he wanted to make the movie in black and white, but the studio said no because no one goes to see black and white anymore. Did you
We
not
would
see?
watch
Whatever.
it,
Yeah. But
Give
so
just
that's
give
a
us a
whole
black and white
other.
filter, just yeah,
yeah,
we were talking about to bring it back to tonight for a second, the infamous "We Forgot the Copyright," and
Yes.
how this
mhm,
is not only the most pirated movie of all time, it is also the most remade movie of all time.
yep,
Yes.
Because everybody and their mom can make a quick horror movie and call it Night of the Living Dead, and nobody can stop you. And Gary, you had mentioned that you had almost watched the Sid Haig version.
Yeah, I love Sid Haig, but I was like, no, I already got burned on the Day of the Dead remake with Ving, so I was like, no,
Oh, yeah.
I'm tapping out. And you
Yeah.
said you
Now,
watched it
Erin,
though.
I did. Erin, did you see the Sid Haig Night of the Living
I've
Dead?
seen that one,
Okay,
yes.
so you know where I'm going. Okay.
Yep, I
So
do.
okay, so it is not, first off, they made it for 3D. Okay. So
Mhm,
there is a bunch of we're gonna stab pitchforks towards the camera kind of BS.
it's
Um
terrible,
it's
it's
and we're
so
talking
terrible.
this is Friday the 13th part
Wait,
3 in
is this
3D.
is
Mhm,
this SCTV 3D?
I mean, you're getting pretty close. I mean, yes. I mean, there is literally one where Sid Haig has a pitchfork and he just
yeah,
launches it at the freaking camera. But this particular version did do something interesting with the story, which was instead of it being about a single house in the middle of nowhere, they remember
mhm,
that they're next to a graveyard, a cemetery. My
Mortuary?
brain just
Oh,
uh, yeah, my brain went completely bonkers. And normally, what's near a cemetery? There are mortuaries.
yep,
So
mhm.
part of the movie takes place in a mortuary,
and
and
that's
then
probably the only, like, interesting or good turn they made in this.
right. Because what you find out is that technically the night, the dead reanimating has been going on for like a week at this point, and Sid Haig has basically been holding the bodies and putting them in a freezer, trying to keep them from getting out. So the reason why there are so many zombies just ready to pop is because they won't stay in the damn ground, and he doesn't know what to do with them. So as the mortician, he just keeps locking them up, and I'm like, that's actually kind of brilliant. Like
Yeah.
it's a really kind of cool invention. I'm like, all right. And then the movie does not get any better for
Yeah, no,
me.
that's honestly the only interesting part they do to it.
So once that part is over, you can stop and just
Yes.
Yeah. And he is very Sid Haig in it. So if you want to see Captain Spaulding just basically curse everybody out for about 20 minutes and talk about how he's trying to keep the goddamn zombies in the freaking freezer,
Yep.
that's your jam. But then after that, just go back and watch, one of the other makes and you're good to
Mm.
go. But yeah, that does have a little bit of merit. But
Yeah, and I've seen they've put out colorized versions. I've seen colorized when they just they made instead of black and white it was green and white. They just changed the
mhm.
sepia filter. I
Yep.
mean, so yeah, it's been done and redone. And like I said, if
Mhm.
anybody needs to make a cheap buck, you release your version, and then even John Russo got involved. He did a cut,
Yep.
Yep.
which I don't particularly care for, but because it puts on this weird prologue and epilogue,
Hmm.
which I thought were completely unnecessary. But he and Romero split the rights 50-50. And and that's also why we get Return of the Living Dead, which that's
I
a
was gonna
Right.
whole
say,
other podcast.
and that's one of the things that, like, I will give credit to quite a few of the people who have remade it because of the copyright things,
Hmm.
is they still give him credit.
Yes.
Absolutely.
And there are a ton of versions that he got money from.
It's true. I mean,
Mhm.
and there's no way that you're ever going to be able to put that genie back in the bottle, but
No.
people
Mm-mm.
understood
Yeah.
how important this movie was, not only to the genre, but also to creating the zombie, that
Mm-hmm.
they're like, let's just not be assholes about this, and somehow they actually turned out to not be assholes about it, and
Yeah.
that's great. And I
Mm-hmm.
love that.
Well, and you look at the ripple effect that this movie had even on directors, producers, actors that we know now. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, the Dawn of the Dead remake was
Mhm.
Snyder's first film.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I think
and
he did
so it's
Scooby Doo
like,
before that, didn't he?
No, I think Scooby-Doo
nope,
came after.
Scooby was
it came
after? Okay.
I
after.
think Scooby-Doo came afterwards,
It was
yeah,
one
Dawn
of
of the
yeah, but it
Dead was
was
Snyder's first
yeah,
film.
it was his jump from music videos, right?
Yep,
Music videos and
yeah, yeah.
commercials.
and so it's like,
And it's good.
if nothing, I that was, like, my first remembered, like,
Mm.
really, really remembered. It was after that Dawn of the Dead that I went back and rewatched all the others, and
Oh,
so it
man, I
was
can't
like
even imagine watching the original after watching Speed Freak version of Dawn. Like, were you bored to tears, or was it
No,
able to get you?
mm-mm.
Okay, good.
Oh,
That
no, I
that
Yeah.
loved it. I will take that version over the
Oh,
yeah.
other, like,
yeah,
Snyder's any day
yeah,
of the week.
yeah,
But the
and
ripple
we'll get to
effect
that one
that
too.
yes, we will. The ripple effect that Romero had on the industry, period,
Yes.
and how many actors, producers, makeup artists,
Makeup
um
especially, can be
yeah,
effects alone.
exactly, wouldn't have existed without him.
Mhm,
And, like, everything that happened in that mall in Detroit, was it Detroit?
mhm.
I think it was
Um,
Detroit.
No, I think it was
I
still
don't
Pittsburgh.
Was it still Pittsburgh?
you know what? I don't think they ever actually say what
It's
town,
They do out hold
yeah,
on.
you could, up until a few years ago, still go to that mall.
even though, yeah, but what was funny was that they had so many, like, areas that were closed in that mall, and
Mhm,
nobody wanted their brand associated with it. So they tried to get Starbucks to give them some dollars and whatnot, and they're like, no. So then they had to make their own version of Starbucks, and like then the movie made $1 million. Like just made just a million. Oh, ooh, it made a
but
million.
yeah,
It made just a cubic butt ton of money. And
yeah,
everybody missed out,
yeah,
on
it's
that.
the, Monroeville Mall.
In Pittsburgh.
Yeah,
Right.
Um, and, like, Romero's a hometown boy, and
mhm,
so he literally just put out word and people showed up at the mall.
Yep.
They filmed that movie when the
mhm,
mall was closed because one of the guys knew the manager of the mall.
Romero knew him. That was
yeah,
actually how he
Yeah.
came up with the idea. If you get the DVD, the extended, not the extended,
Mhm.
but the 4 movie version of it,
yeah, the one I
there's
love
like,
that version.
I love that one too. There's like 4 different documentaries. Basically, for
Yeah.
every version of the movie, there's a documentary that comes along with it, and they talk about how Romero basically knew this guy from business connections, and
Yep.
how he had just made this mall, and how they basically talked about the fact that there is actually an emergency bunker in their mall
Yep.
in case something bad happens, and that's what got Romero thinking about it. But I did like the fact that he comes up with the idea, and nobody ever questions this in Dawn of the Dead, the original, that there's a nuclear power plant running the mall in the
Oh,
gut.
Mhm,
yes. No,
yeah,
Like
we yeah.
they literally say it
We're
must be
perfectly fine
nuclear.
with it.
And I'm like, wait a minute, there's a nuclear power plant attached to this mall? What?
But so,
mhm,
like,
Um,
even there's moments in it where, like, the entire makeup crew's the motorcycle crew that drives
yes.
through, and, like, there's no stunt men, nothing, everybody's doing their own stuff,
Yep.
and
mhm,
then you look at the remake,
Hmm.
and it's just like, how did it go from being, like, this tiny hometown boy
Yep.
using friends and people he knows and random ass people off the street who are gonna come in and get
mhm,
done up as zombies to that.
Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, and to kinda tie it back around, that's one of the things I love about Night and the original Dawn and whatever, is the fact that we have normal people as the zombies.
Yeah,
There's a whole
Hmm.
cross section. You have older people, fat people,
yep.
thin people.
Oh,
In the original
there
Night of
he
the
is.
Living, the one naked people. Um,
Yes.
and the fact
Oh,
that
yeah.
Romero basically did not give them specific directions, because he said that at one point in one of the documentaries he was talking about, if you tell people, hey, you're as a zombie you need to do this, and that you're
Oh,
going to have
yeah.
100 people all doing the same thing,
Right.
and his direction to them was, you're dead, act dead, and then let them come up with something.
Yep.
People would come up with amazing different things just out of, well, okay.
Here's what I think a zombie would act like.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, when I look at zombie performances, the zombies that I will always remember is, so if I have to pick a contender for all of the Romero zombies, 68 goes to the white zombie, the first one we see.
Yeah.
That
Mhm.
weird shamble, and
That,
then him
and
just,
that face.
oh, I mean, he's basically Frankenstein's albino cousin. I mean, he's
Yes.
just
Yes.
gnarly. I love that guy. He's amazing. And then when you go to Dawn of the Dead, Flyboy,
Hmm.
nobody out zombies
Oh.
Flyboy. Oh my
Hmm.
Oh,
god.
no.
I swear he had to dislocate his freaking ankle or something to walk like that. Like,
Yeah.
Yeah.
he walked on his ankle, people. That's crazy. Um, Obviously Bub in Day of the Dead
Ah, yes.
Yep.
is
I love
just
Bob.
amazing. I mean, honestly, that's where Romero did something where everybody had done the zombie motif so much where you have no empathy for the zombie, and he was like, no, there's still something in there, and he starts
Yeah.
playing with that idea, which of course then goes into the Land of the Dead, where you
With Big
get
Daddy.
Big Daddy, and Big Daddy actually starts to become sentient again. That was a crazy idea. And I love that. But in the 1990s one, I think still my favorite zombie performance out of all of the zombie performances is going to be the little girl. When
Yeah.
she's only
Hmm.
there for like 10 seconds, but that shamble that she has, where like the brain's trying to remember how to walk just after dying.
Yep.
Creepy.
And a lot of it too isn't just the remembering how,
Hmm.
it's the fact that you're gonna start to go into rigor.
Hmm.
Your tissue is breaking down, your muscles are breaking down. There's so
Hmm.
many of those factors that, like, when you watch his zombies and see how they all move, you can see that.
Yeah.
And the fact that all he said was, "Walk how you think a zombie should walk." And we like, those walks have personality still. They like, you can tell they were individual people.
Hmm.
They
Hmm.
aren't just like Gary was saying, they're not all just an army of people going, "Oh," with their arms out in front of them.
Yeah.
Right.
It
Yeah.
it matters. It
Yeah.
really matters.
Yeah. There's a great little collection of short stories that came out shortly after Romero died that Romero was actively involved with,
Mhm.
called Knights of the Living Dead, and it's all
Hmm.
short stories set in the time frame of the '68 movie. And that's one of the things he worked on it with Jonathan Maybury, who's a great horror writer and has done a lot of really good zombie fiction. And he was talking about the fact that, yeah, it's there is still a person trapped at the back of the brain of these zombies. And
Hmm.
you feel such, in that for him, is like he feels such pity and empathy for these zombies because of that, because you realize that, yeah, each one of these used to be a person.
There's still a little nugget of you back there. It's not a fully realized person anymore.
Mhm.
Your brain's trying to figure out how to make the connections. And that's what I thought was interesting about what he did in Day of the Dead and then Land of the Dead is it's almost like they've suffered. I mean, it's not like they almost have. They have suffered the most traumatic brain damage you can
Yeah.
possibly conceive of.
Hmm.
And we know that the brain can rewire itself in amazing ways. And it's trying to rewire itself so that way it can function as normal. And the only part that is currently working is the part that says, I have to eat.
I
Yeah.
have to survive.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
that's
And
the
that
only
was,
part.
yeah, and that's part of Frankenstein's thesis
Yeah.
In Day of, if we keep them fed, if we keep them satisfied, they
Mhm.
can be used in productive ways.
Yeah. They can be
Which
domesticated.
Shaun of the Dead,
Hmm.
Yes.
like, that's
Oh,
how that movie ends, is
Yes.
showing that, like, okay, yeah, they can do all the menial tasks that nobody wants to do, like bag up your groceries and
hmm.
bring in grocery carts and yeah.
And you know what's great is that I felt that the universe saw me as a person who suffered as a zombie phobic human when zombies were not the big thing. Because not only is it named Shaun of the Dead, they spell it the same way I spell my name.
Yep.
Yep.
So I knew for a fact I was going to love this movie, and I do love that movie because that movie got exactly what made zombie movies amazing. And it's funny
Yeah.
because now I'm a massive zombie person. Anything zombie, I am there for. I will watch it. I will give it a shot. And or if it's even zombie adjacent, with the advent of stuff like 28 Days Later, you now have like the
Mhm.
rage kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But or you have like a Train to Busan where you have I mean they're technically zombies, but I don't know what you would classify them as, the kind of weird, we can't do anything at night, but as long as we can see, we're after you.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I
But
call them T-Rex zombies
okay, fair enough, I like that.
Mm.
Yeah.
because
you
if you
know
don't
um
move, they can't see you.
kind of, right? Yeah, I mean, you know but I mean, you have all
Okay,
these
now I
different
need
versions of
Jurassic
zombies.
zombie.
No.
I need a giant T-Rex
Jurassic
zombie.
Priest was enough.
Oh,
What
Velocipaster?
I was going to
Yes.
say Velocipaster. Yeah, I was like,
No.
I
Velocipaster
loved
didn't do it for you.
Velocipaster.
No.
That movie is
Come
horrible.
on.
I love it.
Sometimes you got to show up for the bad, because it's going to be bad, and you
Oh,
just got to
yeah.
say, "This is where I live right now," and just enjoy the badness. I
Mhm.
could get behind a zombie, like I could totally get
I need
behind
zombie
a
dinosaurs.
Aren't
zombie dinosaur would be
technically
great,
all of the dinosaur zombies?
Eh,
but like if they could reanimate them, like like
They
seriously,
are
like
reanimated.
no, but I mean like literally, like somebody goes into like what, like have it be like a sequel to like have it a horror sequel to Night at the Museum, and somebody has reanimated
yeah.
just the bones,
Oh,
but
that
they're
reminds me,
still
there's a
that'd be
no, yeah.
great.
Yeah, I need a undead velociraptor against a living velociraptor or
Well,
something.
again, remember velociraptors are really only about 2.5 feet tall, so
Look,
you're
let
not
me
talking
let me
about
have
velociraptors.
let me have my
You're
JP
talking
film.
about Dionysus, okay? So
Okay,
Dionysus are what you're thinking of, and those things are metal AF. They are fast horses. You got to ride one in our D&D game.
that's true.
So
I
don't
did.
forget that.
They were
You
great.
did. And they had feathers
Um,
on them. That's the thing.
mhm,
People forget that they had feathers. I'm sorry, I'm
yeah,
ranting.
that's okay. But
I
yeah, and
rant.
now there's like that reminds me. There's another horrible movie I have to track down and watch. Sharkula. It's a shark that's turned
Oh,
into a
yeah.
vampire. The box art alone, it was like, okay, this movie is gonna suck, but I
Add
have to watch it.
Tammy and the T-Rex to that.
Oh, okay.
Oh my lord, no. Okay, look, if you're gonna Tammy, look, there's actually a way that you can watch a lot of movies, and that's if you could find either the Monster Vision cut of them from back in the '90s when Joe Bob would do his cutaways, or if you do the Last Drive-In on Shutter. He actually last drove in a
Mhm.
drive-in Tammy and the T-Rex.
Okay.
Makes it so much more watchable because you get to hear all the backstories about how
Yeah.
basically the guy who made this movie was able to get a fully animatronic T-Rex for 2 weeks.
Mm.
And basically, he had control of an animatronic T-Rex before it got shipped up to freaking like Saskatchewan, Canada. And he could do whatever he wanted to with it as long as it still worked when he sent it out. And they're like, make me a movie. Like from the time he had the dinosaur to the time they had to ship it out, they had to write the script and film this thing in 2 weeks.
Yep.
Remember the
Eh,
giant fire in Hollywood,
mhm.
Malibu, that almost burned down like half of Hollywood in the middle of the '90s? They filmed during the middle of that fire.
Yep.
You can see the fire in the background of certain shots because they can't stop shooting. And so like just over the hill is like full on death. You
But
got
explain to me, like, how they got Paul Walker and Denise Richards.
nobody knew who Paul Walker and Denise Richards
I
were yet because
know,
this
I
was like what
know.
94, I think, when they filmed it,
This
94, 95.
I wanna say it was both of their, like, either 1st or 2nd
Yeah, it's so
films.
bad.
Oh, that's great.
Oh,
The
yeah,
the the
it's
only
atrocious.
the only sin that is greater than Tammy the T-Rex is that horrible Texas Chainsaw Massacre with Matthew McConaughey and Renee
And Renee
Zellweger.
Zellweger.
With his
Where
turbine-powered leg or whatever
yeah,
it
and
is.
Yes.
remember when he jumps out the second floor and he's like, "Oh!"
Well,
We have
as
never
fun as
gotten a
this
night.
is, we've gone
Oh,
way off
we
No,
topic.
no,
So
have,
but you
we
know what?
have.
But you know what, Gary? We have never gotten that version of Night of the Living Dead, and I want
we
that
have
version.
not.
I want a zombie T-Rex, Matthew McConaughey, made in 12 days. Gorilla yelling. I want reanimated monster. I want reanimated dinosaurs. I want reanimated like monkeys. I want a reanimated panther. But I want it to all be bad. I want it to be on the budget of like a sci-fi movie circa
You want an Asylum
2005.
Yeah.
No,
or
ooh.
Trauma?
give them a little more money. Let's give them Asylum. Asylum actually tries because
Okay.
they think they're
Yeah.
actually making something good. Lloyd Kaufman is brilliant because Lloyd knows he's making garbage and he rolls into it. Again,
Yep.
he goes where the puck is going to be, not where the puck is.
True.
But that's what
So
you talk about that movie real quick, and we'll get back on subject in a second. Renee Zellweger tried so hard, they re-released that film when, like,
yes.
both
Yeah.
she and McConaughey got big. She
Yep.
tried so hard to stop it because she knew what shit that was.
Yes. And the great part was is they're like, did they pay you? Yes. Did you get paid? Yes. Then you can't do anything. They own that
Nope.
movie. If they would,
Yep.
they're
Yep.
trying to capitalize on my fame. Well, good for them for having
Yeah.
something in the hopper for 5 years or whatever the hell. And that
Like
movie's
good
so
for
bad.
them.
Seriously, that's the movie, guys. If you've and this is just me talking to your fan base now. If you've never seen this version, at one point Matthew
Oh
McConaughey
god.
reveals that the reason why the Texas Chainsaw Massacre family, which by the way their last name changes depending on
Yeah.
which version you're in, is still allowed to butcher people up, is that they're part of a CIA experiment to basically cull the herd of Americans. They don't care who, just the ones they can get a hold of.
Yep. Oh, and there's an entire scene where, like, the victims are getting chased in a car by Men in Black.
Yes, like
Yeah.
there's actual Men in Black
And,
in this
like, it
movie.
never fucking touches on it again, never mentions them again, but, like, they are getting chased by a sedan full of
Mhm.
men in suits.
And when you think about the fact that the first movie is basically about a guy who's just defending his home in Texas, which, by the way, stand your ground laws, right? He's
Yep.
perfectly within his right. That guy walked into his house. The fact that he beat him over the head with a hammer is inconsequential. The fact that he ate him afterwards, whatever. He was defending his home. That is a home invasion. That is Macaulay Culkin as a grown up kicking ass.
Okay, there is something I have to. Okay, Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, which I believe is the full title, is
I think
somehow
so.
becoming this podcast's official movie because I don't think we've had an episode yet where we have not talked about it.
What seriously? Has everybody been talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The
It
Next
always
Generation?
comes up at least once.
Oh, I did not know that.
It
I'm so glad
really
I was able to
does.
add. I
We're
am,
gonna just need, like, an entire episode just on that, and it's
We
still gonna
are.
come up every episode.
but you know what? During that episode where you actually talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Next Generation, don't talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The
No,
Next
we'll talk
Generation.
about every other Texas
Yeah, you
Chainsaw
talk about every single
Massacre.
other Texas Chainsaw in some way, or you know what? Don't even talk about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Instead,
We'll talk
do
about Edgar
Julie.
Allan Poe.
No. Do Julia and Julia. That movie about the woman named
Oh,
Julia
Oh
who
god,
discovers Julia
no.
Childs. Yes, but you have to make it just as
No.
bad. So,
Oh, it doesn't
or
take much work.
right,
yeah.
or you could do The Holiday with Kate Winslet and
Which is
what's her name?
actually a
Cameron
semi-enjoyable
Diaz.
movie.
I actually
Yeah.
really enjoy The Holiday a
Yeah.
lot. I watch that movie quite frequently. Anyways, back to Night of the Living
That's
Dead.
yeah. So to wrap up,
Welcome to what
what
our
we
Patreons get to see,
yes.
which is just
Yes.
that
Yeah.
end of this
Oh, that's right. I forgot. They actually
conversation.
get to see the video of this. So I'm sorry, by the way, from like 35 minutes ago when I readjusted, you guys saw my stomach because I just was like, not like my
Oh, no,
t-shirt, and I was like, sorry, I
that
was readjusting.
that was Podcast After Dark.
That yeah, that
Yes.
was. I mean, it's not like it was just a black t-shirt, but I just was adjusting. So, um,
Um, but
but
what would we kind of have to talk about the impact though, because again, this is a movie from 1968. There are a lot of
mhm,
movies made in 1968. This is one of the few that still holds on. We still talk about it. Like we said, it created a whole new monster. It created a whole new genre. It was one of the first midnight movies because if you
Mhm.
wanted to program a midnight movie, you could pay nothing to get it. Um, Aaron, what's the legacy, do you think, of Romero's Night of the Living Dead?
Well, I think we touched on that a lot of the makeup industry for horror movies would not be what it is without
Hmm.
Night of the Living Dead. I think the impact and the levels he was willing to go to and got his cast to go to
mhm,
for not just the makeup that they wore, but
Hmm.
the effects and reactions that they had to do, like eating.
mhm.
Hmm.
That
Which pig livers and chocolate syrup, if I remember correctly,
yes.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
Ugh.
And so it's like there were huge impacts on that, and that like, I can't even imagine nowadays if we hadn't had that, how long it would have taken us to get to where we are now with
Yeah.
makeup and graphics and gore. And like you said earlier, he hooked us. And every horror movie that came after that, we had a couple minutes of pause or
Hmm.
like a tiny little intro, and then it started.
Right.
It may slow down partway through, or like we have steps now essentially that
Hmm.
most horror movies follow, and we all know that. But he was the beginning of those. And so like we would not have modern horror or even slashers, classic horror, whatever that we have
Hmm.
Yeah.
now without him having done this.
Yeah. No Night of the Living Dead. There's no Last House on the Left. There's no The Fly. There's no Cronenberg. There's no body
No.
horror.
There's really not. I mean, you're talking about, you have created an entire industry of, first off, you have the little guy that could, I mean,
Hmm.
literally,
Yep.
that's what Romero was. Romero was a person who kept trying to come up with something that could sell, and nobody wanted to give him a cent, and that's why
Yep.
he just said, you know what, I'm going to do it on my own.
We wouldn't
And
have had Evil Dead.
yeah,
Yeah.
you wouldn't have had Evil Dead. You wouldn't have had Sam Raimi, who just had like the
Yeah.
biggest comeback of his entire career with
Yep.
freaking Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. I
Yeah.
mean,
Because
it's like,
he
it's
kept going
crazy.
up to the, yeah, because he was like, there was a line and he broke through that line and suddenly there was a
Yep.
new line that everybody had to break to get past.
But it
Yeah,
also showed that like you could do this on your own.
you really could, absolutely. And that is something that is incredible. And talking for a moment about 1968, Gary and I, we did a panel a long time ago called 1982, the best year in movies.
Hmm.
1968 is also one of those movie years where, if you sit back and think about it, just to give you context of how important 1968 is to modern movies. Night of the Living Dead, obviously for horror, is a massive, 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 just flag on the mountain. 2001: A Space Odyssey is also from 1968.
Yep.
Elvis's comeback, the movie,
The
is
68 comeback
1968.
special. Yeah.
The 68 comeback special, Bullet, is
Oh.
1968. Barbarella is 1968. Romeo and Juliet, the definitive version until the one that came out in the late 90s for most people,
Mhm.
came out in 1968. You're also talking about the fact that, you're talking about Gamera. The very first Gamera movie came out in
Mm.
1968. When you're talking about horror, you're talking about Rosemary's Baby. You talk about Rosemary's Baby and Night of the Living Dead, literally the polar opposites, as far as one is
Oh, yeah.
polished, one is, backed by a freaking studio. And again, amazing film. And then there's this guy who literally is shooting on news footage and just showing up. And then, of course, you can't mention 1968 without mentioning the massive, massive, massive science fiction movie, not 2001: Space Odyssey, which is great, Planet of the Apes,
Yep.
Yes.
which also had incredible makeup effects. 1968 is a huge year for cinema.
And a
And
downer
it is,
ending.
and a downer. I mean, let's be fair. A lot of these movies that I just
Yeah.
mentioned do not end on a high.
It
I,
wasn't a great year.
Yeah.
I
it wasn't.
mean,
68 was a bit grim.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 68 is definitely one of those years that, as a country, America knew that something
Mhm.
wasn't quite right, and we were seeing that reflected in our movies. That's why things kind of went the way they did in the later part of the 60s and then into the 70s. See, like, people could feel that, and the artists who were able to tap into that were able to create art that still sticks with us today. And that's part of the legacy that Romero really has given us, is that
Mhm.
he's given us a legacy of doing it yourself, tap into what's happening around you, and
Yep.
find a way of really bringing whatever you can to your story to make it about something.
Mhm.
And again, for me, I look at Night of the Living Dead as the ultimate us versus them. You know,
Oh, yeah.
and
And
the irony, of course, is that we're still all us. There is no them. And
right.
that's the irony of the entire situation, is that there never was a
Mhm.
them. And it's a lesson
Right.
that almost 60 years later we still haven't learned.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, well, I mean, Carlin put it set best, talking about, humans are great on ones and twos. Once you start getting about 10 or more, we start putting on armbands.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is like these people in this house, if they had just worked together,
Hmm.
would have survived the night.
They
But
really
what
would have.
destroyed them wasn't the zombies, it was that
Yep.
internal frisson.
Yeah. And that's what makes that movie so
And
fantastic. And
shooting
then on
at
the
a shooting at a gas pump because that's a brilliant idea.
Oh, I know. But you know what's funny is that, and again, this is something that a lot of people don't remember. In the 1990 version, he shoots at the gas pump, immediately blows up. In the
Yes.
Right.
68 version, he actually successfully is able to unhook the
Yes.
gas and is able to start filling up the car.
He
He
just
screws
pours
up
it all over
because
the car.
he pours it all on the back where the freaking torch is at, and that's what causes them to blow up because he's an idiot who doesn't know how not to depress the freaking handle until he puts it in the damn car. So I mean, like, I'm sorry, like when you look at like stupidity on stupidity's sake, he rolled like a 20 on don't blow up, and then he blew himself up anyways. Like, how stupid are you to roll a 20 and then roll a 1 right after that? I mean, come on, dude. Like, you beat the game, you got there, and then you blew yourself up anyways.
Yep.
That's your own dumb fault. Like, and I'm gonna stand on that one. Tom, if you're out there, you're hearing me in Zombie Land, you an idiot. Okay, buddy? Like, you screwed up, buddy. Um, I love this movie. I could talk about it all day. And best part of the story, I forgot to tell you guys, or I know Gary knows this, but I didn't tell your audience, is years later at Dragon Con, one of the last appearances he made before he stopped doing appearances, Romero was at Dragon Con. This is
Yep.
Mhm.
mid late 2000s.
It was like
He
2001, I think.
no, this was because it was after Laura and I got married, so this would have been at least 2008, 2009.
I was gonna
Okay.
say, I was thinking it was like 2007, 2008.
Yeah,
Okay.
it'd have been 08, 09, something like that, maybe
Yeah.
2007. But he was in the Hall of Fame, and Laura and I
Yes.
walked in there, and we had not gone to where we're always on panels and stuff, so we could just kind of screw around. And I told him as best I could the story I shared here tonight, and this asshole laughed his balls off at me for like 5 minutes, and like I swear, like he was about to cry from laughing so hard at me. And he was like, I'm glad I was able to make such an impact in your life. And he sincerely meant it. Like
Yeah.
he was tickled pink that he was
He
able to make.
loved that he scarred people.
He
Oh
did.
yeah.
He loved that this movie that he made with a bunch of friends on weekends, and
Yep.
after work nights has had such a tremendous impact on people. And I was like, and I couldn't fault him for it, because if I had that kind of impact on people with a piece of artwork that I created,
Yeah.
I would be tickled too, because that's like the highest form of flattery. I made a horror movie and you scarred me for life. How is that not a compliment?
Well, that's what you talk about that, and I mentioned it earlier that Killer
Yeah.
Clowns from Outer Space fucked me up as a kid.
Oh my God.
I
Like,
met the guys at Dragon Con,
oh, did you? The
Mhm.
chain, the
probably just, like so pre-COVID, probably, like, 2 years pre-COVID.
okay.
Mhm.
So within the past 5 years,
Hmm.
and they're absolute sweethearts, and I was standing there talking to them and telling them that, like, "You guys are why I was terrified of clowns as a kid," and they were like, "Wait, how old were you when you saw it?"
Right.
And I was like, "Oh, I was probably, like, 7 or 8," and they were like, "What the fuck were you doing watching that when you were 7 or 8?" And I was
It's
like,
it's fair.
"Listen, my mom made choices."
Yeah. I think I saw
Shit
Killer
happened, but,
Clowns.
like, they cracked up and were just, like, reacting to the fact that I was that young when I saw it.
Yep. I can't even imagine my parents showing that to me on purpose. When they found out about it, because I did a podcast about this story a long time ago, back when I had my own podcast. And it was like one of our first episodes, and my dad listened to it. And ever since then, he has apologized. Every single time somebody mentions Night of the Living Dead or Short Circuit in my presence, he immediately looks at me and says, I'm so sorry. Like, it's Pavlovic for this man now. He has to immediately apologize for scarring me. And I'm like, Dad, it's okay. I was like, it's become such a wonderful part of my identity. How
Oh,
could I
yeah.
not love this? But yeah, seeing Killer Clowns from Outer Space at 8 years old, I could see that messing me up. My wife refused to watch it for the longest time. It was funny. She refused to watch horror movies for the longest time. And I finally started getting her into it about 15 years ago. We've been together for almost 25 years. And I slowly was able to work her up. And what I did is I found stuff that I knew she would like, and I started to build her up.
Mhm.
Killer Clowns, the first time she watched it was about 5 years ago. And she was like, "I don't know. This has clowns in it, and I hate the art, and it looks scary." And I was like, "Honey, it's not scary. I swear
It's
to God."
not.
And at this
Mhm.
point, she had already watched all the Hellraiser movies. She had watched
Oh,
all the Halloweens. She had watched Nightmare on Elm Street at this point, which was like the movie she would not watch. She was like, "I will not watch the Nightmare on Elm Streets," because she was terrified of something actually getting her in her dreams. And I was like, "You realize that like Freddy's like a superstar, right?" And she's like, "What do you mean?" I was like, "He's only scary in the first movie or so." And I was like, after that, he's the reason why you show up. And
Mhm.
so then the way I got her into slashers was I finally got her to watch Friday the 13th. And she was like, "I don't want to
mhm.
watch a guy just murdering a bunch of teenagers." And I was like, "Laura, the whole reason you watch this is because the teenagers are just paper cutouts.
Yeah.
Like literally you're rooting for the bad guy." And I was like, "Just imagine you're Jason when we start watching these movies." And
Mhm.
yeah, and as soon as I gave her that instruction, she walked into the Friday the
Yeah.
13th series and you have never heard the kind of evil maniacal laughter.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Oh,
oh my God, it's so funny to listen to her. Like she
yeah.
just loses it.
Yeah,
Just
we yeah, we're gonna do each of we're doing each of George's movies individually. We're doing gonna do each of the Jason movies individually. Your wife
yes.
is who we want for 7
No, no, no. You want her for
or
8.
8.
I'm
8.
7.
8.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're 7, 8.
I'm Carrie versus Jason. She's Jason on a boat.
Yes.
Um,
Oh,
Jason Takes
Jason
AK
on the
Manhattan.
boat.
AKA Jason Takes Manhattan. And you know what? Like literally she
That's her
cries from
favorite.
laughter. It's her
I
favorite.
love that
Every
one.
time we watch Jason Takes Manhattan and they get on that damn boat, she starts laughing and does not stop until they get to New York. And then she's like, "That's Canada." Like she she cannot stop laughing at that movie. I mean,
Except it is Times Square.
it is that Times Square, and when he walks through, and those guys, when he kicks that boombox out of the way, she's on the ground, like she is
Oh,
like busting a gut.
that was not scripted.
I love
Yeah.
that
Like,
so
they
much.
literally took him to Times Square. They
Yep,
couldn't get the approvals to film it,
yep,
and so, like, they were like, "Fuck this." Took him and a camera to Times Square,
yep.
walked around Times Square, and those interactions are actual interactions.
Love it so much.
Mm.
Yeah, it's so good, so good. And you
Yeah.
know what's great about that is the fact that I remember listening to Kane Hodder talk about that one time, and he talks about the fact that people were so into Jason to
Oh,
see
yeah.
Jason in Times Square, the actual actor, and they knew they were filming. He was like the noise level. He was like it was like I was Elvis in Vegas.
He
He was
yeah,
great.
no, he up until that point, like, he did not have that experience.
Yeah, it's not
And
like you're Freddie, where you like
no.
you have the charisma. You're
Also,
just a walking shape.
Kitty.
podcast kitty,
Hi,
say hi,
kitty.
baby.
Hi,
She's like,
kitty.
"I just want lap attention time."
Yes.
But yeah, and I love that
Ah,
Romero was able to see that, and I love that Romero was able to see what zombies became before he
Yeah.
passed.
yes.
Um, I
Indeed.
wish we'd have gotten more. I think the only thing that is ever a ding against Romero, and I hate to speak ill of the dead, so to speak, is the last couple of movies. Eh,
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
Yeah.
Diary of the Dead, I respected him trying to go again, kind of like found footage, try to go back to his roots of just we're just going to shoot this on a shoestring budget and shotgun
Yep.
it, and I appreciate that, but it didn't. But
He was
what was the
past that.
what was the
Yeah.
one after that where it was basically the Hatfields versus the McCoys on an island?
Oh,
Do you remember which one that one was?
I forget the
What was it?
title of that one,
hold
but
on.
yeah,
It
it's
wasn't Diary of the Dead because Diary of the Dead was the
Diary of the Dead
kids
is
shooting
the
is
where he
basically
takes
the
Yeah.
the
remake
pot
of Night of
shots
the Living
at the
Dead.
running, yeah. And he
Yeah.
takes the pot shots at the people, the running zombies. He takes a pot shot at those.
Right, right. But I forget because like I
Hold
mean
on.
the Diary of the Dead actually has some merit to it, but like overall the movie's
Empire of the
fleas
Dead?
plot.
No, that's not it.
No, that's not it.
Survival of the Dead.
Oh,
Survival. There we go.
Survival of the Dead. That movie did not survive. Oh, that movie
No.
no good. Mm-mm.
No.
But like I will fight a bitch about Land of the Dead. I actually
Land of
really
the Dead is
appreciate
good.
Land of the Dead. Yeah.
Land of the Dead is also got some great performances, but we'll get there to that one.
Yeah,
But we've
like
actually talked longer than the runtime of Night of the Living Dead, both versions.
not hard to do. I mean,
No.
No, they are
but we
quick
haven't
little
talked longer than Dawn of the Dead. Dawn of the Dead, the
true,
director's cut is like what, 2 hours and 30 minutes or something like
at
Mhm.
that? 3 hours.
least.
Yeah, so we got
Ah,
some time.
all right. So, Shaun, while we do our bit of wrap up business, would you mind sitting in this alcove for a second? I got a really comfy chair here. I got a videotape set up for you too.
What are we going to watch?
But where can we find you online?
Well, you can find me online at Numaz. That is Pneumaz. That's pretty much all my social medias. You can also find my wife and I with our Popcycle materials at facebook.com/popcycled. We also have an Instagram, and you can also find my wife at Dr. Mrs. The Awesome. And of course, we'll be at DragonCon 2022, and we plan on being at 2023. So come out and see us and say hello. And if you like the story about Romero and the zombies, let me hear your zombie story. I love talking about this stuff. This is my favorite. I've been basically been belligerent about Gary, about when do I get to be on the horror podcast, Gary? When do I get to be on the horror podcast?
One
Gary,
of the one of the
Gary.
first people, like
And I was like,
Gary.
what like, come on, Gary. And like, this is like what, episode 5 or something? I'm like, you did
Yes,
5
5.
episodes before you got to me, you son of a bitch. And I'm like, if I write a movie, you're getting hit by a car. Okay. Like, hey, Gary, I got a role for you right here. Okay. This is where the assholes, okay, hit him. You know, like, well, it's
But we
okay.
need a stunt man. Ah!
No, there are no stunt people in our movie. This
We
is
don't have
grassroots.
we don't have the funding for
We don't
that.
have the funding. We don't. No. But no, thank you for having me on. Seriously, I love that I got to talk about zombies, and specifically, we got to talk about Night of the Living Dead. And like I said, I can suck the air out of the room just myself talking about this one. I love this movie.
Yeah,
Thank you guys so much for letting me be here.
thank you.
Thank you for being
And
here.
yes. So if you enjoy the podcast, please follow us, subscribe. We have a Twitter, we have a TikTok, we have a Facebook page. Look for A Podcast of Amontillado. Again, great thanks, Shaun. And if we have to, we'll chisel you out from behind the wall. But Erin, you got that last brick?
Yeah, here you go.
Thank you.
For the love of God, podcast on!
For the love of God. You have been listening to A Podcast of Amontillado, a production of Good to Be a Geek Media. Thank you for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode, please tell your friends, then like, subscribe, and leave a review on your podcast platform of choice. If you would like to support our efforts to explore all of the dark, dreadful, and terrifying parts of the world, please join our Patreon, where you can gain access to behind-the-scenes materials, backer-exclusive episodes, vote on upcoming topics, watch the video recordings of each episode, and other bonus content. Please visit our webpage, www.goodtobeageek.com/shows/APOA, where you can find show notes, host and guest bios, links, merch, and more. If you have any comments, questions, corrections, or suggestions for the host, please find and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, TikTok, or send an email to apodcaskofamontillado@gmail.com. We are also part of the Good to Be a Geek Discord. Feel free to descend into the catacombs for a visit anytime. Opening and closing music is Softly Shall You Sleep by Valentine Wolf. Please look them up on your music platform of choice or at www.valentinewolf.com. A Podcast of Amontillado is trademark and copyright Good to Be a Geek Media. Logo and show art is designed by Aaron McGorn. This episode was produced by Gary Mitchell. Avino Atrocitus. This broadcast is presented in partnership with Good to Be a Geek Media. Let your geek run wild. The opinions expressed in this broadcast do not necessarily reflect those of Good to Be a Geek. To learn more about this broadcast and other shows in the network, visit goodtobeageek.com or find Good to Be a Geek on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at goodtobeageek.